You want me? Okay. I'm Art Miller. I'm somewhat similar to her. I've always somewhat similar. I've always been fascinated with the arguments in favor of and against Milgram, and I side myself as a Milgram supporter, but I was always impressed with many of the critics. This goes back 30 years or longer. I just liked the debate. I liked the controversy. I liked the. I would read an enthusiastic supporter where Alan Elms once said that he thought the research was the most important research ever done. He was Milgram's assistant. And that it would prevent genocides in the future. I suspect one would question that, but you know, it was a passionate defense in the most visceral sense. Critics were outraged to the point of steam literally flowing from their pages. Eric Fromm, Bruno Bettelheim did equate the experiments with the Nazi medical experiments. And he said, I was in a concentration camp. I know what I'm talking about. So that's my general stance. When I started out as a young professor, a young assistant professor, and had an occasion to contact Milgram for a book of readings I was doing, I was really a much more zealous enthusiast. I took the hard, the hard line that, look, if you want to study something important, you're going to have to ruffle feathers. You can't study something this significant, this deep, and do it dancing lightly through a tulip garden. You're going to irritate people. You're going to have them undergo stress, and I would say things like, if you want to know about this phenomenon, then that's how we must study it. If you don't, okay, but be willing not to know about it. You can't have your cake and eat it. And I argued against role-playing, and I argued against naturalistic observation and other things. I mean, I was pretty much trained or brainwashed to think that way as a graduate student. I mean, the key was to randomly assign people that did the independent variable and get the cause and effect under control, and that's how you did research. I mean, who's kidding who? There's no just because it's too hot to handle. You can't you can't do away with it. Now, obviously that kind of argumentation fell like a lead balloon in a lot of people's minds. They don't care about my babbling about how significant it was, or the hard road, or you can only do research on difficult things. I'm sure this applies in some clinical topics where people are studying suicide and other very angst-laden phenomena. I mean, it's difficult to study these things. No one said it would be easy, You can't paper and pencil it. You can't ask people to estimate how far they would go. As Leroy said this morning, they underestimated vastly. So the only cure for that problem is to find out what really happens. I was always impressed with the distinction between the underestimation of obedience in people who would describe the study and the actual results. I thought that was a fascinating finding. And a real rationale for doing the research. On deception, I mean, I was taken with Herb's 67 Psych Bull paper on the human subjects in research. In fact, I reprinted that article in the book that I did in '72. That was a time when Herb was really the leading spokesperson for a very and the critical thing about Herb's critique, and again, it was such a almost poetically stated criticism of Milgram. That is, you could see his struggle with, because he wanted to know the information, but he really had feelings about the ethics and the stress involved. But he was from social psychology, which I thought was always the interesting thing, that he was a critic from the inside. That was really heavy to me in authenticity, because he knew Milgram, he knew Ash, he knew all about social psychology inside and out. So for him to take it on from the inside was an especially memorable criticism. Deception for me then was, I always, and I think I would do it now, related to the ethics of deception never bothered me. I saw it immediately as akin to the placebo control in clinical trials. Where you have intentional deception, the patient doesn't know whether they're getting the medicine or placebo, and the researcher doesn't know which patient is getting which treatment. They intentionally, you could say, deceive themselves. They intentionally prevent themselves from knowing the truth for the best of possible reasons, for reasons that are life-saving. You wouldn't have advances in pharmacology and in medical science if the subjects knew what condition they were in, because you couldn't interpret the results so clearly enough. Same thing with the social psychological research. Now, of course, once you say something like that, critics will jump and say, no, there's a difference between medical research and social psychological research. And you can't, Baumrein said, it's not like a medical breakthrough. We don't know if this research is worth a damn thing. It's not going to cure cancer. So don't do it, It's not it's not important enough the benefits aren't worth the cost. Now, a couple of other points. I hold in my hand not the paper I prepared to read to you this morning, or excerpts from. You're saying, thank God, because it is 30. It's 34 pages long. This paper I received 2 weeks ago. There's a special issue on research ethics that maybe some of you are in that same journal, or same special issue. There's a special issue on research ethics coming out, and I was asked to be a commentator on one of the papers. What paper am I sent? Diana Baumrein wrote a paper. I mean, she may be, I'm 73, she's got to be in her 80s. I don't know. I read Baumrein when I was 28. Is Milgram's deceptive research ethically acceptable, Diana asks. She says in 34 pages, no. This is the most, and what this demonstrates, if nothing else, is Lee Ross's famous, or with Charlie Lord, you work with Charlie, on belief perseverance and attitude polarization. She is angrier than hell. And she has not given an inch. I don't know what I'm going to say about it. I thought her paper in '64 was the most single important paper ever published in the Milgram saga in 50 years. And I have reasons I don't have time to explain, but I thought that was the most hot, most venomous, most. She says, remember, Milgram had things in his study that were inflammatory. The famous, I always felt in part the ethical outcry was a function of the way Milgram wrote his article up. She quotes Milgram's famous, "What motivated my critique of Milgram's paradigm was less the distress of some subjects than the unconcerned manner in which Milgram described their distress." So I don't like that. I thought she would say I was upset about their distress. She doesn't like Milgram. Milgram wrote, "Subjects were observed to sweat, tremble, stutter, bite their lips, groan, and dig their fingernails into their flesh and have bouts of uncontrollable seizures of laughter so violently convulsive that it was necessary to call a halt to the experiment." Now, would you now, in hindsight, advise Milgram to write that way about what he found? I mean, many experimenters have seen anxiety in their subjects, but he couldn't have written it more graphically. He couldn't have baited the critics more flagrantly than to write as if he was, half near killing these people and putting their lives at risk. So, I think he was just being naively honest. I think that's what he saw and that's what he wrote. He didn't know what Baumrind was coming around the corner. She says, Milgram's Machiavellian procedures that inflicted emotional pain on his naive subjects modeled what I claimed were unacceptable research practices that students and colleagues would be emboldened to emulate by the kudos Milgram received for his unethical, albeit ingenious paradigm. Students were, and perhaps still are, being trained to deceive subjects without compunction. And in general, her main thesis is informed consent. She cannot stand deception that takes place at the informed consent level. She feels that wipes out the study as being acceptable altogether. She is just a radical, she takes a radical anti-deception, and specifically when it occurs in the informed consent phase. She feels deceiving subjects about the purpose of a study is a sine qua non of an unethical study. Pretty much case closed. We know that there are many reasons why you can't disclose the purpose of the study at the informed consent phase. At least that's the belief that some of us have. I don't think all of us have that belief. That's one kind of mainstream belief about methodology. That the moment you introduce knowledge about the purpose of the study, you immediately create a potential artifact and a lack of ecological validity. Because in the real world, people don't go about attitudes and behaviors where they suspect that there's a purpose to their being there that somebody else knows and who is studying them. So, in some sense, it's like an arc that is returned, And to see this paper, it may be a little cheap shot too. It's already been accepted. So I'm not. You'll see it in print, but I couldn't resist telling you about it because I think, in some sense, it sort of, is a nostalgic trip in one sense and a return to where we started in another. Thank you.